In the dry desert of western China, archaeologists once opened an ancient tomb that had been sealed for nearly 2,700 years. Inside, they found a man believed to be a shaman. He was buried with items that suggested status, ritual, and travel into the next life. But one discovery stood out. Beside him was a large amount of cannabis, preserved for centuries beneath the earth. This was not a random object placed in the grave. To the people who buried him, this plant had meaning. It may have been medicine. It may have been sacred. It may have been something they believed he would need beyond death. But this tomb was not the beginning of the story. By the time this man was buried, humans had already known cannabis for thousands of years. The story of cannabis begins around 12,000 years ago, when early farming communities in Asia began selecting plants that could help them survive. And cannabis was one of the most useful plants they found. Its fibers could be twisted into rope. Its stalks could help make cloth. Its seeds could be eaten. Its oil could be pressed. It could be used in tools, clothing, medicine, ritual, and trade. For ancient people, cannabis was not simply a drug, it was a survival plant, a plant that could feed you, clothe you, heal you, and help build the world around you. That is why so many different cultures kept returning to it. In ancient China, cannabis appeared in early medical traditions. Old texts connected with Chinese herbal medicine described it as a plant with healing value. From there, it did not stay in one place. As trade routes expanded across Asia, cannabis moved with merchants, travelers, healers, and nomads. It traveled through mountains, deserts, and markets. Along the Silk Road, people exchanged silk, spices, metals, stories, and plants. Cannabis became one of those plants that crossed borders easily because every culture found a different use for it. Some used it as fiber, some used it as medicine, some used it in ritual, and some used it for its effects on the mind. In the mountains of Central Asia, archaeologists found ancient evidence that cannabis was being burned during ceremonies more than 2,000 years ago. At a burial site, researchers discovered wooden burners and heated stones. Chemical testing showed traces of cannabis. What makes this discovery important is that the cannabis used there was not ordinary wild cannabis. It appears to have been stronger than the plants naturally growing nearby. That means people were not using it by accident. They were choosing it carefully. They heated stones, placed cannabis over them, and allowed the smoke to fill the ritual space. For them, cannabis was not just a plant. It was part of ceremony, death, memory, and belief. Ancient writers also describe nomadic warrior groups using cannabis smoke. One famous Greek historian wrote about the Scythians, a powerful horse-riding people from Central Asia. He described them sitting inside small, tent-like spaces, throwing cannabis onto hot stones, and reacting with excitement as smoke filled the air. For a long time, some people doubted the story. It sounded too strange. But later, archaeological discoveries in frozen tombs supported what had been written. Researchers found remains of tents, heated stones, and cannabis seeds. In other words, the ancient description was not just imagination. It matched the evidence in the ground. Cannabis also appeared in religious settings far from Central Asia. At an ancient shrine in Israel, researchers found cannabis residue on an altar. The plant had been mixed with another material to help it burn slowly and release smoke. That detail tells us something important. The people using it understood how to prepare it. This was not random burning. It was controlled. It was intentional. And it was part of a sacred act. Across the ancient world, cannabis could be practical, medicinal, spiritual, or ceremonial, depending on who was using it. That is what made it so unusual. It fit into many different worlds. One reason cannabis became so closely connected to human culture is that the human body already has a system that responds to compounds like the ones found in the plant. Our bodies naturally produce chemicals connected to mood, pain, memory, and sensation. Cannabis interacts with that same internal system. This does not mean every culture understood the science. They did not need to. They understood the experience. They noticed its effects. They remembered them, and they passed that knowledge forward. That may be why cannabis became important not only as a material crop, but also as a plant connected to calm, ritual, medicine, and altered states. India has one of the longest relationships with cannabis in human history. In the Atharva Veda, one of the ancient sacred texts, cannabis is described as one of 5 sacred plants, and in Hindu tradition, Lord Shiva is strongly connected with bhang, a drink made from cannabis leaves and milk. According to one story, after Shiva swallowed a poison powerful enough to destroy the world, bhang helped bring him back to calm. Even today, people still prepare bhang during festivals like Holi and Shivaratri. Thousands of years later, the ritual continues. But India was not the end of the story. Cannabis kept moving. And in China, it entered one of the most dramatic medical stories in history. Around 200 AD, a Chinese physician named Hua Tuo mixed cannabis with wine. He gave it to patients before surgery. and according to historical accounts, he was able to operate while they felt nothing. This was nearly 1,800 years before modern anesthesia. But being ahead of your time has always been dangerous. Hua Tuo was eventually summoned by Cao Cao, one of the most powerful warlords in Chinese history. Cao Cao suffered from severe headaches, and Hua Tuo was one of the only people who could treat him. But Hua Tuo wanted to return home. He wanted to practice medicine and treat ordinary people, not spend his life serving one powerful ruler. Cao Cao saw that as an insult. He had Hua Tuo arrested, imprisoned, and executed. Before his death, Hua Tuo tried to pass his medical writings to a prison guard. The guard was too afraid to accept them, so Hua Tuo burned everything himself. His formula died with him, and nobody has ever truly recovered it. Then there is a story from the Congo that almost sounds impossible. A warlike tribe discovered cannabis and changed completely. They stopped fighting. They stopped killing. They reorganized their society around the plant. They renamed themselves the Bena Riamba, meaning the Sons of Hemp. They called their territory Lubuku, meaning friendship. Their greeting became Moyo, and Moyo meant two things at once, hemp and life. One word for both, because to them, the two ideas were connected. For this group, cannabis was not just a plant. It became the center of peace, identity, and community. By the time Europeans began colonizing the Americas, cannabis had already been part of European life for centuries. Not as a rebellion, not as a counterculture symbol, as a practical crop. Hemp fiber was used to make rope, rigging, and sails. Ships depended on it. In a very real sense, the age of exploration was partly held together by hemp. So when settlers arrived in the New World, growing hemp was not controversial. It was common sense. It was like planting wheat. But soon, there was a problem. Tobacco was more profitable. Farmers preferred to grow tobacco instead of hemp because it made more money. Governments kept asking farmers to plant hemp, but eventually, asking was not enough. In Virginia, the Assembly passed laws requiring farmers to grow it. Not suggesting, not encouraging, requiring. That is how essential hemp was. It became the center of peace, identity, and community. For centuries, cannabis was part of everyday life. Then, in 1930, a man named Harry Anslinger became head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He stayed in power for 32 years, and he changed the way America saw cannabis. Anslinger linked cannabis to Black Americans, Mexicans, and Filipinos. He claimed it made minorities dangerous. He also targeted jazz musicians and viewed their music as a threat. One of the people he went after was Billie Holiday, not just because of drugs, but because she sang Strange Fruit, a protest song about lynching that made powerful people uncomfortable. Anslinger stopped using the word cannabis and popularized the word marijuana because it sounded foreign, and fear was the point. He collected sensational police reports called the Gore Files, linking cannabis to violence and insanity. When he asked doctors whether cannabis was dangerous, most said no. He ignored them and used the one who agreed with him. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act passed. Then, in 1970, cannabis was placed on Schedule 1, the same legal category as heroin. A plant humans had grown since before the wheel was now classified as one of the most dangerous substances on Earth. Years later, Nixon's domestic policy advisor, John Ehrlichman, gave an interview that placed the policy in a darker context. He said the administration wanted to target two groups, anti-war protesters and black communities. They could not make it illegal to oppose the war. They could not make it illegal to be black, but they could associate marijuana with one group and heroin with the other, criminalize both, and then arrest people through those laws. That was not a conspiracy theory. That came from one of the people involved in building the policy. In 1988, the DEA's own administrative law judge, Francis Young, reviewed medical evidence about marijuana for 2 years. After studying the evidence, he concluded that cannabis should not be classified alongside heroin. He recommended moving it away from Schedule 1. The DEA rejected his recommendation, and that decision helped shape the world we live in today. Cannabis has been part of human life for around 12,000 years. It has been illegal in the modern sense for only about 90. That is less than 1% of its relationship with humanity. For most of history, cannabis was just there. People made rope from it in the morning. They used it in rituals at night. They turned it into medicine. They wove it into clothes. They used it to build ships. Some cultures feared it. Some worshipped it. Some tried to erase it. But humans kept coming back to it. And that shaman in the desert, the one buried with a harp, horse bridles, and 2 pounds of cannabis, knew nothing about drug schedules, politics, or modern arguments. He only knew that this plant mattered, and the people who loved him believed it mattered enough to send it with him into the next world. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories about ancient humans, forgotten history, and the strange ways our ancestors lived. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.